From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. This is episode 50. Yes, we actually have had enough material for 50 episodes.
Wow.
Probably not enough for 51, though.
No, this is the last episode.
And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Nick, we are 2 episodes away from our anniversary. And it's going to be a lot of fun, man. I'm really excited. And
yeah.
As we get closer to it, we're going to start reaching out to our fans and asking them, what kinds of things can we do that would, celebrate this and be fun. But, man, it's wild, isn't it? We are 2 episodes away from 1 year doing this.
Yeah.
Lots happened, man.
That's pretty wild.
I've come a long way from sitting at my desk with my phone on voice memo, like just yelling into a speaker.
For the awful pilot.
Yeah, God, that I actually looked for that the other day. It's gone.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good, thank God.
Unless Laura has it, because I'm pretty sure we sent it to her. She was our very first audience.
You sent it to me, and I played it for her.
You probably have it in your email.
Ooh, I'll go destroy that as soon as we're done.
And Nick is now taking his computer
terrible.
and he's smashing it on the ground, not knowing how email works.
Yeah.
It's not in your computer.
Let's never talk of that episode again.
Jeez, it was so bad.
That was bad.
So bad. I still have a hard time listening to episode 1.
I haven't. And
by then we had done 3 previews. We knew kind of what we were going to do. But episode 1's really hard too.
Yeah, I'm sure most podcasts' first episodes probably bad.
Well, our first 49 are pretty bad. So today's our day. We can turn it around. I feel like we can finally do it.
Every time we record, we're like, all right, we're turning it around.
If you're just joining us, good. Don't listen to anything else.
Okay, now we're serious. This one's for real.
No, this one's for real. That's how I am when I play basketball.
Yeah.
I'm standing at the line and I'll shoot into bricks. I'm like, well, I wasn't really trying. And they're like, all right, this is the real one, brick. All right, no, but this one. I just keep shooting and missing. So welcome to our 50th try.
Yes. So we had teased a while back that we were actually going to do a goal setting. We're going to do kind of a goal setting thing. So a lot of people like to do New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed as a clinician is that most people fail at their New Year's resolutions, but it's not because they're bad. It's because they don't have a good plan of how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
We talked about how doing an episode, but we've actually decided we're probably going to make that a bonus episode.
Yeah.
So we had that on the agenda today. We scratched at the last minute because we got some questions
it's
we
a
want
better.
to get to.
Yeah, I want to make sure we clear all the questions out because we have a good. We have plenty of questions we need to address, and also we can do the SMART goals and talk about goal setting and talk about how to achieve goals. And it'll be perfectly timed, I think, for New Year's. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it'll be a really good thing.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, a little bonus deep dive. That we should start doing that occasionally.
Most of our episodes I've noticed lately have just been promoting stuff that we say we're going to do later.
Yeah, well, that's how we keep them. That's how we keep them coming back, Nick, because they don't realize it's all a scam. I mean, it's a pyramid scheme. Hey, listen, maybe if you guys got 3 more people to listen to this, we'd actually do our jobs. Okay? I need to see the numbers first, and then I'll try.
It reminds me of the Facebook post of if you share this, then then God will heal this kid with cancer.
Or Bill Gates is going to give everybody that shares this $1 billion, and that's essentially what we're doing. We are that meme of podcasts. Yeah. Maybe if enough people listen to this, we'll actually do some therapy. We'll work for it eventually, but for now, we've got good questions to answer, and I think some really intriguing ones, some topics that we've never looked at before.
Yeah,
which is going to be really cool.
Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than sometimes we usually do. So our first one actually comes to us via Twitter through direct message. About in vitro trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Ice Blue Scoop messaged us on Twitter with a question about trauma when pregnant. She's wondering, can an unborn baby experience trauma when something traumatic happens to the mother? Also, is it possible that the trauma could be a contributing factor to the baby's psyche as an adult?
Yeah, man, that's a really good
great question.
Have you ever heard of somebody called a doula? Do you know what that is? The word doula. D-O-U-L-A. Doula.
No.
So there's one in my office. And you've been in my office a ton of times. But next time you're there, there's a little brochure on the desk, and there's a picture of one of my coworkers who's actually the next office over, and it says, I am doula. And a doula is kind of like a pregnancy assistant. It's like a therapist for pregnancy.
Oh, damn it.
Have you heard of this?
Yes, and now I'm in trouble.
Why? Because you know what that is and you should have known?
No, because Laura was telling me about it, and so now I just let on that I wasn't listening when she was explaining it to me.
Busted! Busted!
As you started talking about it, I was
yes.
like, this sounds familiar. It's like, oh.
Get him. So I am looking forward to the next edition of Afterthoughts.
Well, this isn't going to air for 2 more weeks.
You got plenty of time.
Yep.
But I'm excited for the next edition of Afterthoughts and getting to find out what Laura is responding to with all this. So this will be good. But a doula,
by that time, she'll have her Christmas present.
That's right. Then she won't care anymore. Yeah, once you pull a puppy out of a box, she'll be like, I don't care. All's forgiven. So a doula is basically like a helper for pregnancy.
Right.
And they do lots of things, but most of it has to do with like emotional support.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on there, past Jim. This is future Jim, and you're about to make a huge mistake by giving people a lot of wrong information because you are trying to talk about something that you have no clue about. Hey, everybody, it's Jim from the future here to correct the record, and I'm going to rescue you from my own false information in the past. So this question is definitely not in my wheelhouse, it's not in Nick's wheelhouse, but it happens to be in one of our colleagues' wheelhouse, and she happens to actually have an office adjacent to mine here in Las Vegas, where we are both therapists. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Kayla Macha. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a doula. And Kayla, tell us what a doula is. What is a doula?
Hi, well, I'm happy to be on the show to correct your past mistake.
Yes, thank you for bailing me out.
Absolutely.
It was going to be really, really bad. So what's a doula? I know what a licensed marriage and family therapist is, and obviously a lot of couples work, a lot of family work, and general mental health, and love and relationships. But a doula is specifically, in my broken understanding, tells me that a doula works with pregnant women, specifically, and families that are about to have a baby.
So that is true, and there are different types of doula. I'm what's called a full spectrum doula.
Okay.
So I work with clients and birthing persons through preconception, so people who are planning to get pregnant.
Wow.
Especially if there's considerations
Yeah.
like fertility concerns or issues, if there's been previous losses and processing trauma before another pregnancy happens.
Wow. Yeah, we had a miscarriage. My wife and I, we have 2 children. And in between our 9-year-old and our 3-year-old, we had a miscarriage. It was devastating. And then we still wanted another child. And I remember just, it's interesting because when you say preconception, I could see somebody going, really? You know, you're getting therapy before you get busy? And it's like, well, yeah, it kind of was like pretty shattering. Like that was scary. So you'll start working with people even before they've conceived because you know they're building a family.
And statistically speaking, 1 in 4 people will experience a miscarriage.
Oh, wow. Is it really that high?
It's pretty prevalent.
Gosh.
And there's other conditions like hyperemesis gravidarum, which I also specialize in.
What's that?
It is essentially, I like to put it in layman's terms, if you had food poisoning as well as a hangover, and you had to live with that 24/7.
Holy crap.
Most, if not your entire pregnancy.
Jeez. So that is that kind of like like morning sickness, kind of?
Essentially, hyperemesis or hyperemesis means a lot of vomiting, and gravidarum means pregnancy.
Wow.
With morning sickness, that's traditionally during the first trimester. With HG, that can span the entire pregnancy.
Oh my God.
It can be life-threatening. And
yeah, of course. Malnourished.
Absolutely.
So a person will come see a doula basically to help them prepare themselves emotionally, psychologically, and behaviorally in their lives to assist with raising a child, having a child, and going through the whole process.
Yeah, part of being a full spectrum doula is that I might see you preconception. I might not see you until you're at some trimesters, most commonly 2nd or 3rd trimester is when I get a lot of clients. I'm there for the entire labor process. I often joke that I'm dad's coach.
Yeah. God, I could have used one.
Right, dads need me just as much as moms do. I'm also there postpartum.
Wow.
Many doulas only specialize in the first 3 months. I specialize in the first 6 months.
Oh, wow. So
a lot
you stick
of things
around.
happen. I do, yeah, absolutely.
Is it common for you to attend the birth, or do you try to pick up things after all that goes down?
It depends when parents contact me.
Wow.
Most of the time, especially if I'm hired as a labor doula, I'm there for the birth.
Oh, wow.
And postpartum.
Wow.
I've seen a lot of birth in my time. I've
What
been
a
doing it for
genius
years.
thing. Bring a therapist into labor and delivery. That is genius. Like, that is a traumatic experience. Like,
It can be, not always.
Oh my God, it was for me. I was scared.
Right, we
I was
prep
passed out
beforehand.
both times. Oh my God, and I am a therapist. That was useless. Like I couldn't help anybody. I was terrified. So you'll attend the delivery. You'll be in the room.
Absolutely, and
Wow.
I talk to my clients about, I'm serving in the capacity of doula,
Yeah.
not as therapist. Those are different
Right.
relationships, but I bring the skill set.
Sure.
And because my specialties are pregnancy, postpartum, and trauma in my private practice,
Yeah.
it resonates really well
It
as
all
a doula.
connects. Yeah, you don't forget all those de-escalation skills in both. So, okay, so you have two different roles, two different specialities.
Absolutely.
You're a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you are also a doula. And so the question that we got in our show that I am now preventing everybody from hearing because I was so wrong, and I'm so glad I asked you. I was just walking past the hallway, I saw your office door open, I said, hey, quick question, am I an idiot? And you were like, unfortunately, Jim, yes. And I was like, okay, we gotta fix this. So Jim from the future is rescuing Jim from the past. You're welcome, Jim from the past. So the question that we had gotten on the show, one of our listeners wrote in and basically had asked, and I'm actually going to read it. The way it was originally written, we had actually touched it up a little bit. But this is the actual question. If a woman was 5 months pregnant when she may have experienced significant trauma, is that woman, or does that trauma affect the unborn baby? Is it possible that the trauma could be a contributing factor to the baby's psyche, even now as an adult? So, spoiler alert, I said, no, I don't think so, because I think trauma is like something you experience, not something that's like contagious. But when I checked in with you, you were kind of saying, no, man, it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of research that talks about this. Teach us a little bit about what is the answer to that question? I mean, can trauma affect a baby, even though it's happening to the mom and the baby is precognitive?
So my general answer to this would be yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of reasons why. So when we talk about trauma, that could be physical trauma. Mom was in a car accident. Maybe there was a physical assault. And so what we know about physical trauma is that as we experience that, there's a fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And in that stress loop, as we call it, there's chemicals that are released to navigate the situation.
Oh.
So in traumatic situations, when we're in fight or flight, we release chemicals that tell us to be hypervigilant.
Right.
And when we express those chemicals, our placenta, which is the home of the baby.
My placenta
right,
do this.
Right, your placenta doesn't do this.
Yeah.
The placenta that the baby lives in is vulnerable to trauma. So with traumatic experiences, especially compounding, so if we're thinking about emotional trauma or reoccurring physical trauma,
Yeah.
it becomes vulnerable to an increased absorption of these chemicals.
Wow.
And when we think about why this happens, there have been studies done where in World War II,
Yeah.
they studied moms
Yeah,
in
you were
Germany.
telling me about this. Yeah.
And so they tracked moms that were pregnant during times of famine, during times of emotional trauma, and by the time these babies were born, they were born into abundance. There was no more war.
Right, the war's over.
The food was back.
Yeah.
And they found that when they tracked these children into adulthood, even though they were born into an abundance, especially specifically around food, they still developed diabetes, hypertension, heart disease.
Wow, which were associated with high stress.
Which in utero,
Yeah.
the messages they received were, this is not a safe space or safe world to live in.
Oh my God, how about that?
And you must adapt so that if you're going to be born into a world where there's a food scarcity,
Yeah.
that you have an appetite
Right.
that orients
So that's
you towards meeting your
evolution
needs.
preparing the next generation for the environment they're going to walk into,
Yes.
which the mother's body is telling that baby in uterus, it's not safe here.
Right.
And so if you're traumatizing the mother, you are biochemically changing the outcome of the child.
Yes.
Holy
and
shit.
I want to put a pause
That's
there.
a big deal.
Yeah, because I have a lot of parents who come in feeling guilty.
Yeah.
I have postpartum depression. I have
Right.
prenatal anxiety. What am I doing to my
Right.
baby? Am I going to hurt them?
And prenatal means the baby's still in there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I caution this with, yes, everything we do has an impact.
Yeah.
But just like doctors tell you not to eat sushi, if you eat a bite of sushi,
right,
you may not do any harm.
Yeah.
And so we have to take it all with a grain of salt.
Sure. Humans are resilient, right?
They are resilient.
We're not as fragile as we... Because that's exactly what I know I'd be thinking. I'd be like, oh, crap, my wife watched a scary movie. She was scared and she was pregnant. Did we just screw up our kid? But you're saying, no, hold... no. Like,
let's take it back. Let's take it back a little
here.
bit. Yeah. So the beautiful thing about trauma, and I think probably the only beautiful thing about trauma, is that we can heal from it.
Yeah.
And so even if we haven't integrated with words what that trauma was, i.e. in utero or babies or toddlers, our body stores that trauma. Stored trauma.
Our body stores the trauma. Okay.
There's a great book
that
I can recommend, and it's The Body Keeps a Score.
The body keeps a score. Wow. So the body keeps, in a sense, is impacted by the trauma, imprinted by it in a sense, and you can kind of tell after it's happened that this is something your body's holding on to. Teach us about that. What do you mean?
So I also am a yoga teacher.
No way. Is there anything you don't do?
Right.
Can you do my taxes too? You
No,
also
no,
a CPA? No, we're in psychology. We do not do math.
Right, we don't do that.
That's the deal.
So I'm a certified trauma-informed yoga teacher.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Nick and I were actually talking about bringing somebody on that could just talk about that. That's a whole new episode. We're going in that direction. So
We'll get there,
you
we'll
also
get
do that because the body's holding on to the trauma.
Yes, and so
Wow.
as our body holds on to trauma, the option of releasing trauma is always available to us.
Okay. Wow.
So I often talk to my clients about generational trauma and what that means.
Yeah.
So, as we were speaking in my office, when a woman is pregnant with her daughter, her daughter's eggs are forming. And so what happens to the mom happens to the daughter, happens to her future children.
That's incredible.
It is. Also,
And you were saying like at 8 weeks is whenever the daughter's eggs are already forming.
Yes.
God, this is nuts. Wow.
And then we have to consider that dad's mental state and diet and activity during time of conception also plays a role in the development. Right, you don't get away.
Yeah. All these dads were like, okay, wait, I was drunk. There was Raising Cane's. Like, no. I should have been eating veggies, like doing push-ups. No.
And we talk about that in preconception.
You're killing me. Don't tell me this. Great.
And so, if we
I don't want to have any of this responsibility.
Right.
I just want to be all the mom.
Don't want to hear any of
it. Crap. Okay.
And so we know that all of us have experienced some trauma in our lives,
right.
Or we're storing some trauma. That might not be ours. That might be a parent's or a great-grandparent's.
Wow. And so even as an adult, in a sense, you may have physically inherited an imprint of trauma that may have even happened in utero. And so we might be able to notice you expressing this, even though you don't have a memory of anything that really should justify your reaction to that.
Well, and they've done studies where children whose mothers had prenatal anxiety had a 6 to 10% increase in behavioral problems.
Wow.
As a child.
Holy crap. And
there's a direct
linked
correlation.
Back to the anxiety. So to the writer's question, can trauma that happens to the mother affect the child? Yes. And to the second part, can that be expressed even in the child's adulthood? Yes. Wow.
Caveat. We can heal from the trauma we are unaware of.
Wow. Also sounds like the beginning of a really great book. We can heal from the trauma. So when a person might try to treat that, do you think the treatment approach for the child is similar to maybe how we treat PTSD in a person that's aware of what happened? Or do you think the treatment might be a little bit different?
So a lot of the work that I do, I find the best results come from educating and empowering parents, helping them work through their traumas so that they don't continue to play on the traumas that they are storing or that they've maybe...
And that's an interesting point, right? Because if a baby inherits some of this trauma in utero, like the trauma imprints physically upon the child, and the child's born, there's still that conversation of nature and nurture. So like mom and dad, who if they haven't recovered from the trauma, or mom, now the nurture side takes effect and exacerbates whatever the trauma was imprinted on the child. So I hear you saying it's really good to have the parents address their stuff. There's a really great trauma psychologist that actually we reference in our answer to this episode, Dr. Johanna O'Flaherty, and she has a phrase where she says that which is not transformed is transmitted. And she talks about parents and generational trauma, which is kind of what I hear you talking about, the passing on of the torch of trauma.
Yes.
So we have to deal with it early and then deal with it again with the child.
And oftentimes, when we look at what the research says, that moms who experience, and even dads, because on average, the statistics vary due to reporting concerns and whether people report it or not, but moms, on average, 1 in 7 will experience a mood disorder.
Wow.
It's about 1 in 3 if you're a person of color and low income.
Wow.
For dads, it's anywhere from 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 will experience a mood disorder.
And this is after birth?
During pregnancy or after birth.
Wow.
And so if we think about those statistics, moms who receive treatment when they realize they are struggling, on average, their PMAD experience will range from about 6 months to 9 months.
What is PMAD?
Perinatal mood and anxiety disorders.
Yeah,
so
I knew that.
Pregnancy related.
No, I didn't. Okay.
Clarify.
Yeah.
So if a mom seeks treatment for these concerns or dad seeks treatment, then the length of this experience is much shorter.
Okay, treatment's effective.
Treatment is very effective. Psychotherapy is the number one recommendation. If a parent does not seek treatment, they can experience a continued mood disorder up until their child's around 3.
Wow. So that's going to color the first 3 years of that kid's life and the family.
When we talk about bonding and attachment,
oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Now, something I want to close with, because you mentioned this to me, and this is a little off the topic of inherited trauma, but it's to the topic of what it means to see postpartum depression, and you talked about why a lot of moms don't get help. And since I've got you, and since I can talk to this topic, there's a failure of pediatricians to really refer to therapists, and tell us why that system is broken. Why don't people that need the help get the help?
A lot of it's about exposure. If I have a child and I am told to go to this pediatrician because this is who my insurance accepts, and I have a healthy child, I'm not likely going to that pediatrician very often, except for well visits.
Right. We're just going to get shots. Yeah.
The conversation is geared towards, is my child meeting milestones? I might get 5 minutes at best.
We're not asking about you. We're asking about baby.
Right.
Wow.
And a lot of times, if we're addressing mom, it has to do with, is your milk supply good enough?
Right.
Are you doing enough?
Right, which is very sexist. Nobody ever asked me that, you know?
No, not at all.
Nobody cared at all about my milk. And I feel like, you know, I was trying.
Well, and to bring some seriousness to that, there's not a space where dads check in postpartum.
Right. So the parents are largely ignored by the healthcare system because we're interested in the baby, which is fine, but it gets missed. And then you had mentioned that, like, the bonding piece and CPS. What's that about?
Yes. So there's plenty of stories. If you type in Google search postpartum mom arrested, that will come up. Where last year, beginning of this year, there was a mom in San Francisco, walked into her doctor's office, said, hey, I'm not okay. I think I have postpartum depression. I'm not suicidal. I don't want to hurt my baby.
Right.
But I need help. They took her baby from her, kept her handcuffed for 12 hours in a hospital, called the police. It ended up resulting that she wasn't suicidal, she didn't want to hurt her baby, and then they gave her a list of providers that weren't applicable to her network.
Now they just freaking traumatized her and took her child away. Wow.
Here you go, you're off on your way, and that was comprehensive care. But the threat of having your child taken away is a real threat in the current systems we operate in. And so if we discourage moms and dads from reaching out, and then we don't have providers who are adequately trained. Doctors aren't trained in mental health. They get very few hours required.
Right, they don't know.
And then you have community providers. There's not very many LMFTs in Las Vegas that are specifically trained in mood disorders for pregnancy and postpartum.
Right.
And postpartum depression is very different than typical depression that might manifest for the average person.
That's amazing. So what's interesting is not only can trauma affect the child in utero, not only can there be a physical imprint, and in part because of and I appreciate how sciencey your answer was, right? Because I think that whenever I first heard this question, I imagined that there would be some providers who'd have a very voodoo crystals kind of answer, like, no, the chi is affected, you know, and you've disturbed the force. And it's like, I'm not going to dispute those things, but we're practitioners, right? We're providers. We had to do a lot of science to get where we are. It's evidence-based. And in your answer, I very much hear a clear signal of, no, there is a biochemical, observable, and repeatable scientific truth that because these biochemicals are flooding the system in trauma, that is imprinting a very vulnerable uterus or placenta, not placebo. That's a different thing. And it's affecting this baby, and they carry it with them even though they don't understand where that's coming from. It's an evolutionary response. But then the second piece of what you're saying is, and let's talk a little bit about why mental health matters so much, not only during the pregnancy, but after the pregnancy, because parents are not okay and providers are not being contacted. So if somebody is listening and they say, wow, that's happening to my friend right now, that's happening to me right now, and they're saying, I'm pregnant right now and I'm, I think I should be proactive. I don't want to wait and, be somebody that deals with this later. I want to start a relationship with a therapist now, or I want to contact a doula now. What advice would you have for them for how to find a helper who might specialize in this, who might be useful for this?
So I definitely am available.
Yeah, what's your website? Let's hear your website.
My website is www.ka.
No, it's www.
Yes, thank
Not
you.
two W's.
Thank you.
Not just worldwide, but the web.
KandMe, that's Kayandme.com.
KandMe.com. And so that would be how they could contact. Now, you're in Vegas, so you're a Nevada practitioner. So any of our listeners that are in Nevada, they would have access to you. And you work both as a doula and as an MFT. And you're able to sort of take that situation and follow that case wherever its needs are. And you could just sign a different piece of paper that says, hey, right now I'm working with you as a therapist, but we'll pivot back to the other side later if needed or whatever. So that would be for a local. Is there like a database? Like how would people find somebody to live in Oregon or somewhere else?
Yes, so if we're talking about mental health, there's Postpartum Support International.
Okay.
And they're international.
Sure.
They have coordinators that connect people who call into the hotline. It's a 24-hour hotline that you can use regardless of where you're at in your pregnancy, where you're at in the country, where you're at in the world.
Okay.
And you call in, they give you a list of providers applicable to what your current concerns are.
Wow.
So that if you're looking for a therapist,
that's fantastic.
there's that.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so that would be after you've had the baby. Now,
Or before.
doula is spelled D-O-U-L-A, right?
Yes.
Which I only know because I've seen your brochure. So I wouldn't have known that. But since people can't, read this, they're only hearing it phonetically. So D-O-U-L-A. And so if they wanted to find a doula in their area, they might just type that into Yelp or Google.
So there are databases for that as well. Doula Match is a really popular one.
Cool.
There's also Doula Trainings International. They have a database, and I trained through them recently. I had trained 8 years ago, wanted to be best practices, so did it again.
Keep up, yeah.
They have a focus on protecting reproductive rights and a focus on mental health, and then they also specialize in LGBT inclusiveness.
Wow.
So I think that's
cool.
a great place to search for
And what was that
doulas.
called again?
Doula Trainings International.
Doula Trainings International. And then the other one was Doula Match.
Yes.
And that's D-O-U-L-A Match. Very cool. So that is a great way for listeners that if they are pregnant or know somebody that is, or new parents, these could be really great resources. And of course, if they're in Nevada, they should come to www.KandMe.com. Kay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being on Pod Therapy. Thank you for rescuing me from just misinforming our audience, which I do regularly. But at least this time I can apologize for it. So namaste, audience. And now back to your regularly scheduled misinformation campaign by Nick and Jim in the past. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah.
One of the deeper, more interesting questions I think we've ever received.
We were so not prepared for
No, not a. I'm waiting for all these obstetricians to like. No, you're both idiots. Don't answer these kinds of questions,
Which
guys.
may be in fact true.
It's going to happen.
We'll welcome that feedback. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss seasonal affective disorder. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is the very first sponsor we ever had, Mr. Smitty Scoop, who's constantly in competition to become executive board member again. He's constantly in a fight with others to get there again. But we love Smitty. He constantly writes into the show, brings us great thoughts, great feedback, and is also very good at the discussions that happen on our Patreon. Love having him aboard. Smit, you know we love you, man, and you're just a one-of-a-kind guy, and I hope that you're staying warm out there in the frozen Northeast.
I hope your hockey team's doing well.
I hope your hockey team's doing well as long as he's not playing our hockey team.
No, I mean like his personal.
Oh, his personal hockey team. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So kudos with that.
I don't give a shit about the Washington Capitals.
No. They can burn that down. They defeated us in the Stanley Cup. If you'd like to join the party and help make the show possible and tap into that special content for patrons only, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and join the party. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy. All right, Nick, our next question is about seasonal affective disorder, and it comes to us anonymously through our Tumblr account. So, again, if you're listening to the show and you're thinking, man, I want to kick in something, but I don't want them to have my email address, or I don't want to talk to them on Twitter or Facebook, totally fine. Go to podtherapy.net, and there's a box where you can just click a link that says, hey, ask a question. It's an anonymous box. It opens up. It allows you to write like 1,000 characters or something, so you can write a pretty good paragraph question. And if you have a longer question, you can just email us. And just tell us, hey guys, don't read my name, and we don't care, we won't. We're used to that. But if you want to submit something anonymously, go to Go to podtherapy.net and drop us a question in there. So that's what somebody did in this case, Nick. And here's the question: hey guys, quick question as we get into the depths of the winter season: is seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder a real thing? Sometimes it seems like the answer is yeah, totally a real thing. But could also be, it's just your normal issues. You're just noticing them more, and it's cold outside. To, not a thing at all. It's just darker. I assume the answer will fall somewhere along the clinically significant distress thing. People are listening to us, Nick. But I would love your thoughts. Thanks, Anonymous. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, real thing.
Yeah, definitely real thing. Not just real thing, diagnosable thing. Like,
right. It's
in our DSM-5 and absolutely exists. And surprise, surprise, Jim has it! Yay! Another thing in Jim's awesome basket of diagnoses.
So if you're playing
bingo,
Jim's neuros, what's the word I'm looking for?
Jim neurotic bingo.
Yeah. you can stamp that one now.
There's a bunch of people playing at home that just shouted bingo. I called seasonal affective disorder for Jim's neuroses. Oh God, that is so funny. We should totally create Jim's neurotic bingo. Oh, genius. Another great contribution. So yes, seasonal affective disorder. All right. So let's start with, for the general audience, to tell them what the heck we're talking about. So there's depression, right? Depression is this word that we use to describe a phenomenon when people experience hopelessness, despair, apathy, lethargy, loss of energy, interrupted sleep, loss of appetite. All these symptoms coincide with a loss of joy or pleasure, which we also call anhedonia, and it has to last a certain amount of time. And if those symptoms, sort of show up in the same place at the same time, and they cause that magic phrase of a clinically significant amount of distress, then we will say, yep, this looks like disorder. And so we'll usually use the phrase major depressive disorder. And then we have little ways that we can specify that. We can say that this is a single episode, or it's a recurring episode, or it's moderate or mild or severe. So we have lots of different ways that we can designate these things and think about it. Well, major depressive disorder is not the only kind of depression you can have. There's lots of different kinds. There's, what's the dicyclic, dysthymia. Dysthymia is another one. And so that one has to do with like rapid cycling depression. And so there's lots of different kinds you can have. Well, one of the things you can have is something called seasonal affective disorder. So here's what this looks like. As most of you are aware, the Earth moves, is not flat, and because it is round, and because it goes around the sun at pretty much the same sort of guided pace every year, and because it is tilted on an axis, we have these things called seasons. And so right now, as we record this in December, it is cold and wintry here in our hometown of Las Vegas, Nevada, whereas it is summer in Mandia Bayla's hometown of wherever the hell she's from, Australia, which I believe is what the locals call it. Right. That's more the local take. So seasonal affective disorder is whenever you experience the symptoms of depression in a consistent and cyclical way that corresponds with the season, right? And so it's usually winter. Part of this is biological because the actual sunlight is important for your biochemistry. And a lot of people don't appreciate that. But if you go to somewhere like Alaska, which we do have 49th Scoop that's up there, Frozen 49th, we have some friends that are up there in the north, and they actually will tell you that light therapy is a big part of what you'll find out there in Alaska, which is you can actually purchase a light box, and it has fluorescent lighting inside of it. It puts off a certain spectrum of light, which is very meaningful for a person to absorb in their skin and also to experience, for their eyes to actually be upon it and to see things in that light spectrum. It actually has biochemical effects. And this comes down to like vitamin E and things like that. But that lack of sunlight is part of the trigger for seasonal affective. Some of it could just be the conditions of wintertime, and not being active, not being able to get outside. That could be part of it. But seasonal affective disorder is a real thing. And it's whenever you have depression in a cyclical way, you notice it and you always should do something about it. So absolutely real.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, just from, this is anecdotal, but personal experience living in the Midwest, where it feels like we don't see the sun from November until April.
Yeah.
Just because it's always cloudy and miserable.
Yeah.
But, I noticed that, and just kind of a change overall in my affect moving into, a place that has 300 plus days of sunlight a year.
That's absolutely true. But think about like Seattle, and think about,
Seattle,
Houston, places that get a lot of rain, a lot of clouds.
Portland.
They talk about this all the time. And they talk about how, if you look at the data, you'll see that the depressive symptoms are very high in those areas. Well, that goes back to proving seasonal affective disorder's existence, because you are being affected by climate. And so that's something that can affect a human being's mental health. And so the way that we'll treat this too, we talked about, so first off, you treat it the way you treat most things, right? The way you treat regular depression, regular anxiety. You take an approach like cognitive behavioral therapy. Some people get temporarily on medicine just for that season because, they know that this is sort of a biochemical generator, so they're going to biochemically address it. And I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. I also want you to always have clear thoughts and know how to address depression. So it's very, very common. It's actually one of the more common mental illnesses that's actually being cataloged by the CDC. Seasonal affective disorder is well known to be a huge surge kind of issue that does happen in the season. But we talked a second ago about light. So because this is part of Jim's neurotic bingo, I do have seasonal affective disorder, and I strategically have a room in my house. It's actually my office. I don't think you've ever been in there whenever it's I actually turn on the lights. I think we usually are recording during the day.
You always have it dark in there when we're in there together.
Yeah, no. Usually I just have the candles.
I don't get the candles.
Yeah, the candles are there.
That.
There's the aromatherapy that we usually are doing, and but it goes better with the rose petals and stuff that are on the floor.
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, because we also have like that bathtub from the Cialis commercial in there too when you're there. So we want to make sure that you're comfortable. But no, I have like fluorescent lights, like really bright white light, and it was a choice that I made to put it in that room, so that I could have that place to go to. And it makes a huge difference for me. I probably will go in there at the end of every evening after I put my kids in bed and everything. I'll go in there and I mean, that's a workstation. I do work there. But I want to be in that environment, and I need to have that lighting a little bit every day. And
do
it really
they
changes
have specific light bulbs for that?
Yeah, well, not that would be labeled as like this is therapeutic. It's fluorescent, so it's white light, kind of like annoying, obnoxious office lighting,
right? Like
that most people don't like. So if you would describe it as not soft light, not warm light, that's fluorescent, and that's kind of what we generally want you to have when you have SAD, which I'm sure everybody notices spells sad. Yeah. So, but no, it's really, really helpful. And actually, if you go to Amazon right now and you type in Lightbox, you will see that there are tons of different treatment options that you can buy these. It's a box full of light, but they're presented in different ways, and a lot of people will bring these into their homes. They'll put them on a desk, and it's a different kind of experience. And read the reviews, and you'll see people talking about, yep, I've been diagnosed with SAD. I've been using this light box. It's been really helpful. Here's how it affects me. It is a really powerful thing to realize. It's one of the few disorders that we have that you can treat in a non-medical, and by that I mean like medicine, and non-therapeutic way, that actually you can go buy a device that actually makes a difference.
Yeah.
Or a small behavior change, like going out during daylight hours, walking outside. I have to do that during the season. And I think a lot of people would say, good, Jim, you should probably walk around more anyway, but I have to for my mental health. And it's not necessarily the exercise that's saving me, it's that I need sunlight. Or I won't be okay.
So, listeners, go to Amazon and check out those light boxes. Use our discount code, and you will get nothing.
Throw it in there. Let's see what the hell happens.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Amazon.com/PodTherapy.
Worst case scenario, nothing will happen.
Use discount code PodTherapy. Worst case, you pay full price. They might actually add money. They're like, no.
Yeah.
We've been getting this discount code a lot lately, and we're trying to discourage those guys. We don't want any affiliation with Pod Therapy.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will talk about the autism spectrum disorder and mental health. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Jake Schneider. Jake's awesome. We met him when he came out here to Vegas with his lovely wife, Judy, who's also a Theraproducer, I will add. And Jake is just a huge advocate for mental health, and he's one of those quiet pillars in our community that just really enable us to do what we're going to do, and want to open up the door to make sure that everybody that needs to ask a question and has an opportunity to gets the chance to. And so, Jake, we thank you so much for your support of this show, for making it possible. If you would like to join Jake and be a sponsor of this show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. You'll also discover a ton of extra content that we throw up there just for our patrons, embarrassing videos, side talks that we do, all sorts of fun stuff. Go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next listener writes in about autism spectrum disorder. Hi, doctors Nick and Jim. I love that happens, by the way.
That I'm not a doctor, but people address
people
me
keep
that
giving
way.
it to you. So I think that
Was Julius Erving a doctor?
I don't know. Who's
He wasn't.
Julius Erving? Is this? Wait a minute. Hold on. From the anger and sadness and pain in your face,
Dr. J?
Dr. J.
The basketball player? Oh.
We'll wait
Moving
for the
on.
apology
All right,
segment.
moving on.
But no, I think it's funny whenever people give you the honorary doctorate for being associated with Jim. So that is what makes me now believe doctorates are a sexually transmitted thing. You have an STD, an STPhD.
You need to workshop that one a little
I'm going to
bit
work.
more.
Okay, I get positive reviews on that one. All right, so hi, doctors Nick and Jim. I've been listening to you guys since your appearance on Ice Cream Social, Salt Pork. It's been a big help to hear you guys give very useful advice to listeners, and I really enjoy the discussions around current mental health issues at the top of the show. See, some people do like that. Oh, I'm so glad I heard that in this. Oh, yay. For a long time, I've been thinking nobody likes the science. A little background on me before I get to my question. I grew up in a broken home. My parents divorced when I was around 2 years old due to my father's abusive behavior, infidelity, and drug dependency. My mother remarried twice. Husband number 2 was a paranoid man with epilepsy and a predilection for abusive behavior who treated me as less after the birth of my younger brother. Husband number 3 was the second oldest son of husband number 2, a mostly kind man with a history of infidelity and alcoholism. There's a scoop mail that untangles all that web somewhere. Growing up, my mother physically and mentally abused me. I was smacked around a lot, but also made to feel unwanted with frequent threats of being sent to live with my biological father for such infractions as not dusting the shelves to her particular specifications, or missing a spot when mopping, or running the vacuum, or not finishing cleaning my room within the often incredibly short time limit she imposed on the task. Often, I would also be disciplined for being socially awkward. In several situations, I was disciplined for things my younger brother did. My mother is bipolar and very narcissistic, and often denies that what she did to me was abusive. Instead, she speaks as though having bipolar disorder absolves her from classifying the behavior as abusive, though she did once admit that my resemblance to my biological father caused her to resent me. Despite this, I feel as though I made it to adulthood relatively well adjusted. There was a lot of work I did on my own and with support from my wife as I got comfortable enough to deep dive into the more harrowing aspects of my upbringing, but oddly enough, no therapy. So, with that to contextualize, we're nearly to my question. I'm 41 years old now, and I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome about 10 years ago, prior to the big reclassification of that into the general autism spectrum disorder bucket in the DSM-5 revisions. My diagnosis came on the heels of my 2 daughters also being diagnosed as on the spectrum. the oldest girl with Asperger's syndrome, and the youngest with a more general autism diagnosis. Since then, our youngest child, born after all those diagnoses, is also on the spectrum. It's a perfect storm of neurodiversity in my household, with my wife and oldest child leaning toward neurotypical. Ah, these are good words he's using. As a side effect of my ASD, I suffer from high levels of anxiety. The anxiety is currently regulated by medication, and it allows me to be calm and rational enough to think and act my way through social exchanges in a more normal manner, as well as preventing me from melting down when things don't go the way I'd expect or I have to break my routines. Controlling my anxiety over the last 10 years led my life to change for the better, as I have better understandings of myself. On the therapy side, I imagine it's a different kind of challenge, but I also wouldn't want to be without the kind of thought processes I have with the way autism affects my brain, as I think it's had some positive impacts on my creative expression, such as music, and the problem-solving side of my life, a weird blend of network ops and tech support. So my question is this: when treating someone on the spectrum, how do you untangle the autism side of things from the general mental health side of things to treat the negatives without accidentally impacting the positive aspects of the autistic mind? Keep doing what you're doing. It's appreciated by so many. Much love, and effing you in the effing face, Justin, a.k.a. Froyog Serve. Oh, it's Froyo.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, that was a neat surprise.
It's like getting to the end of...
Yeah, I had no idea. That's really cool. Hey,
yeah.
Justin, cool, man. That's a really good question. And I think that, Nick, this is a great question in some ways because there is so much mythology, right, that surrounds autism.
Yeah.
And it's become this thing that's so misunderstood.
Yeah, and first off, I think, Justin, we need to just comment on how well you're doing despite everything else.
Yes.
Like we really need to give you some credit for that. You're an awesome person, and your music is incredible. I've listened to quite a bit of it, and the fact that you've been able to work through all of that to get to where you are, like, I think that's a huge testament to the resiliency that you have.
Yes.
I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and if you're a listener and you heard some of that and you're thinking, dang, I've seen some of that, or my parent wasn't healthy and they were abusive, or even the remarriage cycle, and it's not uncommon to hear of a mother who has bipolar who is marrying over and over and over and over and over and probably had borderline, I would guess. I mean, it's probably there too. But then to survive all of that and then to transcend it, right? And that's the thing we were talking about earlier about trauma. That which is not transformed is transmitted. And it's interesting because he bears this inheritance of trauma, and yet he chose to transform it. And
right.
He is being very intentional about it,
yep.
right? And that's important because I think his daughters will not inherit it the way he did, because he has addressed things and is moving forward from it, taken those deep dives, tried to language what happened, tried to understand it. So the trauma aspect is huge. If somebody is diagnosed with anything on autism spectrum disorder, trauma is not necessarily related to that. Like, that's not going to be an indicator light in any way of autism. Autism is a description of basically the behavior we see in a person, their way of thinking, and some of the outcomes. Some of it's observable, some of it's internal, like a way of thinking. But autism itself, I think a lot of people have come to misunderstand it. When Nick and I hear about autism, we are not thinking of something temporary. We are not thinking, oh, this is similar to depression, and one day you'll live without depression.
Right.
We're not thinking that way. Autism is differently characterized in the DSM-5. It is not considered a mood disorder. I believe it's classified under neurological disorders in the sense that it is the brain hardware that does this. And so this comes to a metaphor I use a lot whenever we speak. Whenever I'm explaining, actually, tomorrow, you and I are guest lecturing at Nevada State College to the counseling students. Don't forget that, by the way.
I totally did forget about that. Okay.
We're guest lecturing. So we're guest lecturing to the students over there at Nevada State College. And it's really funny. Immediately after that, I'm driving to UNLV to lecture at the graduate school for marriage and family therapy. So I'm going to run from one to the other. It's a different talk too. But whenever we're talking to students, we usually try to teach them mental health using smartphones because obvious, like they get it. So we say, okay, so like if your smartphone is broken because the hardware is broken, the actual phone itself fell and into the water or cracked, that's a hardware problem, right? You wouldn't say my Facebook's acting weird, there's this giant crack through it. Like you'd know that's not Facebook. Like you'd know that that's the hardware, it's your phone. And then there's software stuff, right? My Facebook app is glitchy. It closes on its own. I can't open certain things. I can't, it doesn't work. Okay, that's a software problem. When we talk about mental health, we're often thinking in those terms too. We're thinking hardware problems, software problems. Autism is a hardware thing. That is a structuring of the brain. It is a functioning of the machine that produces a certain behavior set. Now, the reason that they recharacterized it in the DSM-5 is because we used to have very discrete categories of autism, like Asperger's. And Asperger's was something that meant it was like a lot of people called it autism light or like diet autism, like mostly functional, but some of these tendencies, but not to the place where they're really, really disruptive. We exchanged that nomenclature for the spectrum, that there's like a continuum, right? And on one side of the line, it's lighter, doesn't have a lot of these symptoms. On the far other side of the line, it's debilitating, and the person actually cannot survive independently.
Which is the same thing they did with addiction as well.
Yes.
It used to be abuse, it used to be dependence, and then now they've moved away from that onto a spectrum, which I actually kind of like that because it doesn't categorize people quite as much, and it individualizes it a little bit more. Everybody's going to show up in a different area.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to kind of get your take on this too, Jim, because it's my experience, because of the differences that you've identified, there are a lot of really good trained people who specialize in autism.
Yes.
So whenever I've worked with somebody with autism for whatever condition, usually for me, since I'm an addiction specialist, it has to do with addiction. We will work together and we'll collaborate, but that individual will still see that professional for the autism and would see me. I feel like that's almost kind of stepping. I don't have that training because I feel like that's a very specific training. That's a specific discipline.
Yes, it is.
That clinician gets into, because those folks, they focus really hard on that. They know it in and out. They have behavioral strategies. They've got all that stuff. It would be difficult for just your average general therapist to just kind of pick that up.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot better professionals out there to deal with that, and I think that's usually where we don't really see that somebody who's treating both.
Yeah, it's uncommon, and there's actually, I forget what it is, but there's a technique that's very, very popular in autism treatment.
You
see it with our PSR workers a lot, PSR and BST people.
ABT?
It's ABT. That's it. Yep. It's and obviously BT probably is for behavioral therapy, and A is probably for autism. But yeah, look it up. But basically, coming back to this point of
I think it's applied behavioral
techniques.
Okay,
I don't know.
I'll look it up.
I think it's applied behavioral taco. I think it's tacos.
You know what? You're right.
Yeah, it's tacos.
It is
tacos. So, okay, coming back to this discussion of autism, because there's a couple of different things. There's a history of trauma here. Okay, that's one thing. Adapting relatively well to that. There's the autism component. Okay, let's talk about that. There's also anxiety and some other things there too. When we talk about autism, like we talked about, it's a hardware thing. Some of those, classic symptoms, inappropriate social interaction.
ABA, applied behavioral
analysis.
That's
it, ABA, applied behavioral analysis, yes. So some of those symptoms of autism, inappropriate social interaction is one, poor eye contact. When we talk about inappropriate social interaction, what we mean is they fail to notice social cues, like the subtle little signs that one person sends to another one. A person who might be on the spectrum, those are invisible to them. They just can't even connect with those. Poor eye contact, compulsive behaviors, like, doing something to perfection, taking it too far, impulsivity, repetitive movements can be a symptom. Self-harm sometimes persists in there. Persistent and repetitious words or actions. If we're talking about developmental stuff, it could manifest as a learning disability. It could be speech delay. When we're talking about cognitive things, it could be like intense interest in a limited number of things or problems paying attention. Psychological things like the lack of awareness of other people's emotions or failing to pick up things like their depression. And then also very common alongside autism is things like anxiety, changes in voice, sensitivity to sound, tics, things like that. Now, all of that goes onto a spectrum, which is how severe is the autism. If it is extremely severe, any kind of exposure, the brain has a very low threshold in those cases to being hypersaturated with anything that's going on. They can be overstimulated very, very quickly, and they need to withdraw, and they might explode, sort of like it could be violent. You've seen children that do this in school sometimes. They have safe rooms that they'll put them in because the child just cannot be talked down. Obviously, in this case, Justin, if you're on the spectrum, like you said, it's Asperger's, it's the very far end, okay? You have some of the autistic tendencies. So here's how I kind of want to challenge you. Basically, Justin, you are Blade, the vampire hunter. You have all of their strengths.
Go on.
None of their weaknesses. So he has this hyper ability to analyze and detect data quickly, or come to conclusions quickly, or fixate on something and take it to a place of almost perfection and really improve the quality of it, right? And that's some of those autistic tendencies, like that ability to sort of zoom into the granular data of something and really take it to a great place. And yet, it's not to the place where it's clinically significant amount of distress, it's not distracting, it's not taking him apart. So I think it's something that's really great there. Now, to his core question, he said, is there a way to treat the bads, like this anxiety I'm experiencing, without taking away the power I get from my autism? Guess what? Nothing's going to change how your brain thinks. That autism piece, like we talked about, is a hardware thing.
So honestly, we're not going to treat somebody on the spectrum when we're dealing with anxiety. They're not going to be treated any different than anybody else.
We're just going to treat the anxiety.
Exactly.
Yep, that's it. And so to his core question, where he's talking about how do I untangle, right? He said, how do I untangle the mental health side without kind of influencing the autistic mind? Honestly, the autism is going to continue. And so that little bit of spectrum that you have, it's not causing clinically significant amount of distress. It's not going to be targeted with something like ABA that's going to get those results. Mm-hmm. We're going to treat you with cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to treat you with DBT. We're going to treat you with the normal approaches that deal with anxiety to try to bring that down, and probably also address some trauma, because like it or not, as adaptive as you've been, trauma can still influence and create the anxiety inside of you. So we would address those things, but to your core fear, might my mind, the way my mind thinks, will I lose my powers? No, that's not going to happen. Because if you bring your phone to me, and I'm a software programmer, I write apps and I rewrite code in those apps. Me updating your Facebook app is not going to change the fact that you have a Samsung, right? Like I cannot influence that you're holding a Samsung 9. A Galaxy 9. Like, I don't have that. All I can do is rewrite the app. So when you go to a therapist in this kind of situation, they're going to update your anxiety app. They're going to update your trauma app. They're not going to change the autism firmware that you run on everything. They won't do that.
And I wouldn't think that therapy would be any less effective.
No.
Given the spectrum.
No, not at all.
Than anything else. So I think, just treat the anxiety. Just, get into therapy.
Treat the
talk
problem.
To somebody.
Yeah.
Deal with that anxiety. I think you'd be fine.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And again, I want to apologize for Justin, because we went through this very difficult season in the pod therapy history. Those who've been with us for a long time know that there's only really one thing that Nick and I have ever actually fought about, and it was changing the theme song. And Justin unfairly was brought into this quarrel just for being a friend, just trying to be a nice guy who was like, I'll help. And I was like, back the hell off, Justin.
Yeah. Collateral damage.
He just got splash damaged.
Yeah.
So, Justin, again, nothing personal, man. I'm sorry that I made threats. I'm sorry I said terrible things on the internet.
I did what I could do.
Yeah.
I did what I could do, Justin.
You did nothing wrong, man. But great question, brother. And thank you for sharing that. And I hope that everybody that hears that draws strength and remembers that, you know what, we are not what we come from. We can become anything. And as long as we take ownership of that and take it seriously and get the support that we need, we can become a better version of ourselves. Good for you, Justin. You're a living example of how mental health should be.
Excellent. All right, time for the end of the show. We want to thank our Patreons.
Yeah.
So we want to thank any new THERAPALs who joined us, which we don't know.
You're listening to this from the past.
Yes,
yeah. So we don't know if you just signed up. So that would mean for our THERAPODs and THERAPALs, we don't know if you just joined the party. And to all of you who gave up on us and left, you know what? All right, fine.
That's fair.
Hopefully my mom is among them. Hopefully my mom is among the people who are no longer supporting the show and who cannot access our special content. But by now, she's probably only gotten deeper into the rabbit hole. So, but we thank all of you guys who go to patreon.com/therapy and support our show. Nick, because we are blasting from the past, I probably do not have any apologies, unless I'm apologizing to the United States Navy and all who have served honorably for bringing my terrible self onto one of their battleships and sullying the good name.
That's probably going to be
That's
the
probably
case.
a key apology. I probably should make that apology.
And of course, we want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Theraproducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie, Junior Mint, Kayla, Lansbury, David, Data Scoop, Vialon, Judy Schneider, Gray Whitaker, and Dr. Ben Don.
Yep, and make sure that you're checking our Patreon for those book club installments and for our secondary podcast called Afterthoughts. And as we get to the end of December here, we're going to be loading up some special content that's going to be addressing how to set goals, how to deal with anxiety. We're going to do some cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, and eventually you will also hear of my new project.
We would like to announce that Jim may
I'd like to announce
something.
This is like the equivalent of a promise ring. Like, this is a pre-promise ring. I got it to say that one day we'll consider getting a promise ring.
The Pod Therapy Promise
The
Ring.
the Pod Therapy Promise Ring, worth jack. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Copy and paste the episode link in the description so you can share it wherever you want to. And don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and of course on patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Dangeman.
I'm Admiral Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.